Over the next few months, you'll notice that Lakeview is offering Formation 1, 2, and 3. Let's talk about what each of these classes has to offer. Formation 1 answers the question, how do we read and understand the Bible? Formation 2 answers the question, how do we practice what we've come to believe? And it does this by exploring Christian disciplines like prayer and silence. Formation 3 answers the question, how do we face difficult and current issues from a Christian perspective? Formation 3 is being offered Thursday, October 27th from 7 to 9 p.m. Our topic for this session is understanding our Ahmadiyya Muslim neighbors. For more information or to sign up, email me at allison@lakeviewchurch.com.
The AGM is coming up November 6th. Childcare will be provided. This is for members of Lakeview Church, but anyone is welcome. The AGM is a chance to vote for new board members. It's also a chance to see where we've been and get a sense of where we're headed. For those of you that would like to review financial statements in advance, they will be available at the information desk.
Hey guys, next weekend the Link is hosting a brunch following both services on Sunday. So we invite you to stick around, hang out, have some brunch, and connect with the folks that we do church with. Donations are gladly accepted. We'll see you then.
Do you love to sing, but you're a little nervous about singing in public? Well, choir is for you. Or maybe you're a very confident singer, but you might want to improve your technique or sound, or just have fun hanging out with other singers. Well, choir is for you too. Everyone is welcome, young or old, beginners, or more accomplished singers. I'd like to see you all out for our very first rehearsal on Wednesday, November 2nd at 7 p.m. here at Lakeview Church in the theater room. Rehearsals will continue every Wednesday until Christmas, and we'll be singing on Sunday, December 4th, and for our Christmas Eve services. And for any other questions, email choir@lakeviewchurch.com. See you on November 2nd.
Cross Connect is a coffee house for women of all ages and all stages in their faith. We come together to love, share, connect, and support other women seeking community in Lakeview Church. Join us this month as we will hear from some of our own women share about their recent journeys with God. See you next week from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. in the Lakeview Theater. Come check us out.
God is compassionate to those who are hopeless, and it is our duty to respond. It's not something we have to do, it's something we get to do. It is a gift. The people in Malanga, they are our friends. And like my son told me this morning, they're not only our friends, they're our brothers and sisters, and they need our help. Men of Lakeview, this is your chance to step up. We are sending a team to Africa to do some much needed construction work. So if you're interested or want to learn more about Hands at Work, we're having an information night Sunday, October 30th at 7 p.m. in the atrium. These are the poorest of the poor that Jesus speaks about. So come out and see how you can be a part of this.
So those are your announcements. For more information, just head to the homepage of lakeviewchurch.com.
So this morning we continue our series in Colossians, and as we have done the last 3 weeks, if you have questions that pop up in your head throughout the message that pertain to what we're talking about this morning, text them in. The number will be on the screen, and then we'll take time towards the end to grab 2 or 3 of them and unpack them a bit further. Also, last week, Lynn did a really good job of taking the big concept pieces that Paul was talking about, because that's how Colossians started. It's big, it's wide, there's these systemic issues of empire that hang over our heads like a big dark cloud. So as Paul's argument came in, Lynn's did as well and said, well, hey, some of these things aren't just big and broad, but they're also very personal. Well, this week, as we hop into the first part of chapter 3, Paul's instructions are going to get really uncomfortably personable, really tight. And this morning, we're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about racism, we're going to talk about sexual dysfunction, and we're going to talk about the cure-all that we know as forgiveness. Whoever said the Bible was out of date? Not us. Here we go. Colossians 3 begins like this. So, if you're serious about living this new resurrection life with Christ, act like it. Pursue the things over which Christ presides. Don't shuffle along, eyes to the ground, absorbed with the things right in front of you. Look up and be alert to what is going on around Christ. That's where the action is. See things from his perspective. So right off the bat, let's be clear here that Paul isn't saying that heaven is physically up, meaning that hell is physically down. He's talking in spatial terms, kind of, sort of, but not really. And we know, right, that up for us is actually down for Australia, etc. This is not what Paul is talking about. What Paul's actually talking about here is worldview. And he's saying, where is your starting point? How are you orienting yourself? Does your life begin with Jesus as the ruler of everything? Does Jesus set the terms for your life and for your death? And for you, this whole Jesus bit, is it more than just some sort of mental gymnastics that you're doing in your head? Does it go beyond that and go towards the very core of your being? Because if it does, we must understand that our fundamental identity is formed not by what we think or believe, but by what we love. So if you love Jesus, then it sets the tone for how you see the world. It allows you to see things beyond the normal range of sight. And we talked a bit about that during our Revelation series, that on this earth, things aren't quite always as they seem. When you lock into this Jesus worldview, you're able to see the bigger picture. So when you see things from his perspective, when you look up, when your orientation begins with Jesus rules the world, what happens to you and I is this becomes a submission on our part. We're giving God access. We're giving Jesus permission to put his healing hands on every broken part of our lives to heal and transform them. This kills off the cancerous bits, and it brings life where previously there was only death, because your old life is dead. Your new life, which is your real life, even though invisible to spectators, is with Christ in God. He is your life. When Christ, your real life, remember, shows up again on this earth, you'll show up too, the real you, the glorious you. Meanwhile, be content with obscurity like Christ. Words like Jewish and non-Jewish, religious and irreligious, insider and outsider, Scythian, we'll get to that, slave and free mean nothing. From now on, everyone is defined by Christ. Everyone is included in Christ. So when we see the world from Christ's perspective, when we give Jesus access, we're actually giving him like a backstage pass to every secret room and every secret corridor that we construct inside of us. We say, okay, have at it. But not only that, we're also giving him permission to take down the walls and the lines that we draw outside of ourselves. Maybe think of it like this, that we go out through life just drawing lines, sectioning things off, but Jesus has got the pencil turned upside down, and he's behind us erasing lines. And then some of us are like that guy in the corner there who's giving Jesus a dirty look. Maybe you've been like that. I know that I have, right? Because when I draw lines, when I create these secret rooms inside of me, when I want to divide me from somebody else, it's because I want to keep them at arm's length. Because if I don't have to be in relationship with them, if I don't have to love them, if I don't have to forgive them, then I feel like I'm off the hook and I don't have to care about them. They're out of my life. But Jesus goes behind us and erases those lines and brings down those walls. Because for Jesus, it's never an us and them. There's only ever a collective us. So with this in mind, Paul throws this word out. Scythians. Who are the Scythians? Well, I did some homework for you this week. This is who they are. So in Paul's world, the Scythians were considered to be the people who were the furthest away from civilization. They were classified as barbarians, as rustic, as wild men. They were on the outskirts. They were kind of dirty. They were crude, and you really wanted no part of them. So see what Paul is doing here. He's using very particular language. Now he's building also an argument that's a classical Greek argument to bring people together in unity. And then he throws in this classification, this group of people who have been much maligned, and he's bringing all those pieces together. Why? Because he's tapping into something. He wants you and I to be aware of something, that you and I often practice rituals that divide. whether that's going on inside of us or outside of us. And we can say that, you know what, well, we don't live in that time. I don't know who the Scythians are. I don't do those kinds of things. But I think to this day, we continue to practice these same divisive rituals. Check out this line from Maclean's magazine just over a year ago. In poll after poll, Manitoba and Saskatchewan report the highest levels of racism in the country, often by a wide margin. This is in January of 2015. Do you remember what happened late this past spring and early summer here in Saskatchewan, where an Aboriginal boy in the backseat of a truck was shot dead? How do we get to that point? How do we go from these ideas to that action? What are these rituals, these divisive rituals that we practice? What do they look like? Where do they start? Does it start with a thought? Does it start with a conversation? Does it start with a joke or a little jab? Does it start with a bad look out of the corner of your eyes? Where does that start? Where does it go? Where does it lead? What are the rituals of division that we practice even here now in this city, in this province? Now, do we have challenges that we have to overcome in things like that? Of course we do. Will the solutions require the best of our love, the best of our creativity and imagination? Yes, of course they will. But we cannot even get to those parts until we begin to identify and recognize and call out those little things that we do that cause divisive lines. And the only way that we can really attack those things at their core is to ask ourselves, how do I see the world? Am I looking up? Do I see the world from Jesus' point of view? Am I allowing him to erase all the lines that I'm making? Am I allowing him to break into all the secret compartments in my life? Because I feel like when we allow Jesus, when we give him access to do that, well, it might look a little bit more like this. This is our Canadian health minister just this week via Twitter. She said, 4th girl takes her own life in northern Saskatchewan, 10 years old. Nothing in my job is more important than this issue. So I don't follow our health minister on Twitter, but my sister does. And the reason my sister does, and she sent me this tweet, is because she is into food sciences, health sciences. She lectures at the university, at Ryerson University in Toronto, and she sends me this line and she says, "Did you read this?" I was like, no, I haven't seen that. I was like, why are you following this? Why is this so important to you? Why is this standing out? She goes, well, I follow this because it's part of her work, it's part of her studies, it's part of her lecturing. And usually all the information that comes around food and health sciences are around issues like vaccination or health or some sort of foods or other studies. And these things bubble to the surface as the most important topics. But then when something like this happens, all those things just fall off the table because nothing becomes more important than this. And then she asks the question, she says, your daughter, have they talked to her in school about these things? And I said, I don't know. And then it really hit me. But I have a daughter who's 11 years old. And I couldn't imagine if she would take her own life. So then what do you and I do in this kind of a situation? That we know the world is a mess. We know there are divisive lines everywhere, outside of us, inside of us. I know I'm a mess internally. I know that I create divisions. I know that I help perpetuate some of the problems. And I want to look up. I want to have the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus be the focus for my life. I want it to bring me perspective on my existence. But how then do you and I hold all these opposing forces and feelings in tension? I think what we run into here, folks, is what we could call this morning a holy paradox. That we live in this middle of contradicting worlds, right? There's the way of the empire, and then there's the way of Jesus. And they oppose each other, yet they coexist. So for Christians, we understand that we live in this time that we could classify as a now and not yet of Christ's rule. Did Jesus overcome the powers? Yes, he did. But has that come to full bloom yet? No, not quite yet. Why? I think it's a means of grace. Because I think for you and I, it gives us a chance, because your story and my story is actually unfinished. And Jesus is giving us the opportunity and the time to slowly let go of the grip on our own lives and submit to his will. So then the question, though, still remains. How do we live? How do we balance out our lives in this holy paradox? How do you and I fully surrender to the way of Jesus? How do you and I quit making these divisive lines inside of us and outside of us? Here are some suggestions, good starter points. That every single time you pray about anything, you declare that Jesus is Lord and the powers that be are not. Or every single time you give thanks for a meal, you are declaring that Jesus is Lord and that he is the provider and the sustainer of your life. Every single time you give your money away generously to those in need, you are declaring that Jesus is Lord and that everything you have is basically on loan from him anyways. Maybe this one might be the hardest. That every single time you stop yourself from ritualizing division, you're saying that Jesus is Lord and that nobody or nothing is outside of his love and his redemption. And if you're willing to go that far, then kill off everything connected with the way of death. Sexual promiscuity, impurity, lust, greed, and grabbing whatever attracts your fancy. Hey, Donald. That's a life shaped by the things and feelings, idolatry instead of by God. It's because of this kind of thing that God is about to explode in anger. It wasn't long ago that you were doing all the stuff and not knowing any better, but you know better now, so make sure it's all gone for good. Bad temper, irritability, meanness, profanity, and dirty talk. So sex and speech are at the core of who we are as human beings. And when we do those things right, it's the best. You know what I'm saying? Right? It totally is. But when we mishandle them, they're destructive. They create relationship breakdowns at every single level. So Paul then puts together here a very interesting list with a curious ending. He lists off these sexual sins that seem to all fit together, but one of them doesn't seem like the others. He says promiscuity. What is promiscuity? It's when you express yourself sexually outside of a truthful commitment. Okay, fine, great, I got that. Oh, impurity, what's that? Well, that's when your character gets sullied by the things you say, do, and think. Okay, check, I got that. Lust, all right, well, lust makes sense. What's lust? Lust is this uncontrollable, insatiable sexual desire that controls everything. Okay, got it. But then curiously, at the end of the list, what else does he add there? You can see it on the screen. He says greed. And then he quickly ties greed to idolatry. So I don't quite understand at first glance what he's doing here. So those sexual sins seem to belong together, and then you got this economic sin at the end. So what's the thread that combines these sexual sins, greed, and then idolatry? I think it's this. I think he puts those things together because sexual sin is fundamentally a matter of covetousness. It's unsatiable, self-gratifying greed that wants to control the other person, that wants to consume the other person, where that person becomes just their ultimate desire. Let me say that in a more simple way. Mishandled, sex then becomes something that we just consume. And when we consume sex in that way, it ends up consuming us. And then Paul tags greed on to this list of sexual dysfunctions, not because sexual things are dirty or sexual things are sin. They're not. They're a gift. Probably best gift ever. Thank you. It's awesome. But he knows that when they're mishandled, they take over your life. They take God's place. They distort your worldview. Because essentially what they say is, I'm going to get my needs met. I'm going to satisfy myself by whatever means possible, and it doesn't matter how I get it done. But Paul says here, yes, it does. It does matter. So practically, what does this mean for you and I? It means that it matters that you and I steer clear of porn. Why? Because Christians are prudes? No. Because porn turns men and women into commodities, something to be consumed. They go from being people to just being a piece of meat. And I've learned that I need to create boundaries for myself and look after myself in that way, because these sexual sins, I'm an all-star, like Hall of Fame status. I can easily slip into those things any day of the week because I watch my own patterns. I've hung around myself for 41 years plus, and I know how it works. You ever seen those movies where the thieves are trying to break into a safe and they've got this like stethoscope down to the safe and it's like click, 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 click when they find the right combination? Well, I feel like that's me. I know that if there is a certain kind of headspace that I'm in, and it's a certain time of day, and I've been in certain kind of conversations and certain kind of fights, and here I am in this place, for me it's like click, 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 and that opens up, and then all hell breaks loose. And this is a new phenomenon for me, because as a teenager, it was hard to get porn. Do you know how hard it was? We had to go to the mall, because that's where the bookstore was. And then when we thought no one was looking, we'd reach up and grab a dirty magazine and put it inside a Sports Illustrated. And then, in public, look at it with 10 other dudes, not conspicuous at all. So there was an effort. But now I'm looking at my kids and saying, hey, this is way too easy for you guys. This is way too quick. So we have some basic rules in our house that if you're on a screen, it's in a public place. And your screen should be facing outward. Is it because I don't trust my kids, or I don't like my kids, or I want to hold them back? No. But I know that if they break into sexuality in this way, it opens up this vault where you begin to mishandle one of the greatest gifts that God has ever given us. So it matters how we handle it. Another practical one. It matters that you and I as Christians, that we don't sleep around. Not because Christians are old-fashioned, but there's just nothing casual about casual sex. As Christians, we hold to the belief that sex is a sacred act, a sacrament, even because it makes God tangible. Why? Because it speaks to commitment, and commitment matters. So when you pull these things together, we begin to see that when we misuse or mishandle our sexuality, it actually dehumanizes us. And when we practice being Christians, it actually makes us more human and not less human. But we must also keep in mind that our Christianity is not something, as we've said before, that we can achieve on our own in isolation and under our own strength. Why? Because perfection is not some individually gained state, but a corporate one achieved in a relationship of love. And this is exactly what Paul is saying. He's saying your sexuality, your speech, your habits, your patterns, your rituals, all of it, they are not individual acts. And ultimately, they're not personal because they are always tied to someone else. Always. So the only way that you can win is if we all win, if everyone is looked after. And when you lose, we all lose. So then Paul says it matters how you handle it, because you've been chosen by God for this new life of love. So dress in the wardrobe God picked out for you. Compassion, kindness, humility, quiet strength, discipline. Be even tempered, content with second place, quick to forgive an offense. Forgive as quickly and completely as the Master forgave you. And regardless of what else you put on, wear love. It's your basic all-purpose garment. Never be without it. What Paul is saying here is that for you and I who are Christ followers, for you and I who know the joy and the peace of being forgiven by Jesus, it is utterly irresponsible of us to not extend that same forgiveness to others, especially knowing that Jesus has already forgiven that person. So if he has, how dare we not? So what this is, Paul is saying, is that forgiveness is another sign to us and another sign to others as to who rules the world. Because every time you and I forgive, we are declaring that Jesus is Lord. So remember, Jesus forgives and makes space in himself for the enemy. This is the radical distinction between regimes of the empire and the kingdom of the beloved Son. So then here, forgiveness becomes the worldview reset button, because it reminds me of who I am, and it reminds me of who runs the world. And sometimes I need a big reminder. Think about it in this way. Some of you might be aware, or maybe even have been alive at the time, but in the 1970s in Illinois, there was a man named John Wayne Gacy Jr., and he became a famous criminal because what he would do is that he would lure young men in, he would abduct them, he would abuse them, he would eventually kill them, and then to dispose of their bodies, he had a dirt floor basement. He would dig it up, and he would bury the bodies under his house and then lay wooden floorboards over it. And I remember first running into this story. I watched a couple of documentaries about it because I was fascinated about the story, and I thought to myself, this is evil incarnate. I mean, this guy is the worst of the worst. What a disgusting human being. He got the death penalty? Good. I'm glad he got it. He deserved it. And as I sat with that, I thought to myself, how could God even ever forgive someone like this? And then years after, I came across a song by one of my favorite artists, Sufjan Stevens, where he actually sings a whole song about this guy. And in the very last stanza, he sings, "And in my best behavior, I am really just like him. Look beneath the floorboards for the secrets I have hid." And when I first heard those lyrics, it struck me. I'm the same as John Wayne Gacy Jr. Have I ever killed anybody? No, I haven't. But I know that I have done damage to other people, that I have hurt others, that I have mishandled my sexuality, that I have not watched my mouth, that I have created divisions, that I have pushed things along that are unholy and are hell-like, that have hurt and destroyed other people. So I have things, secrets that I have hidden beneath the floorboards of my life. And that puts me in a place where I have to say, I must forgive those who wrong me. Why? Because Jesus has forgiven me of so much. So the tough question to you this morning, and it's not a guilt trip or an emotional pull, but it's what's beneath your floorboards. What are the secrets that you're hiding? For those of us who are here today, how many of us might say, I feel high and mighty and good, I'm better than those other people, until we realize what some of the things are that we have buried? My hope for you this morning, as we think and ponder on what Paul is saying to this little church in Colossae, is that this forgiveness that Jesus offers is all-encompassing. So it grabs a hold of all the secrets, all the things that you have hid under your own floorboards, but it doesn't stop there. Because the response to the forgiveness that you have received is to go out and forgive likewise. So then Paul pulls it all together in this last piece we're about to read. And he actually gives us some safeguards, an alternative posture to help us look up, but also to practice forgiveness. And he explains it like this. He says, so let the peace of Christ keep you in tune with each other, in step with each other. None of this going off and doing your own thing. And cultivate thankfulness. Let the word of Christ, the message, have the run of the house. Give it plenty of room in your lives. Instruct and direct one another using good common sense. And sing your hearts out to God. Let every detail in your lives, words, actions, whatever, be done in the name of the Master Jesus, thanking God the Father every step of the way. What Paul is talking about here when he talks about thankfulness is this radical gratitude that brings perspective to your whole life. But in that perspective, it'll also bring you into opposition with the empire. Why? Because we live in a culture and in a society that is really unthankful. We live in a time where I need more, I deserve more, I want more. And even when I get the things I want, there's always something else that's outside of reach that pushes me forward. So Paul says to that church and to us this morning, imagine what it would be like if there was a group of people that were not consumed with consumption. Instead, this was a people motivated, renewed, characterized by this radical gratitude. Imagine what that would be like, because there is no word more offensive to a culture driven by unlimited economic growth than the word enough. And if you're like me, it seems like it's never enough. So here's a little window into my world. Maybe the last 5+ years, the thing that I have been praying for the most is peace. I just want to rest, because I feel like I've got this monster inside of me that says go, move, succeed, accomplish, get, acquire, do, go, go, go. Why it's there, I'm not sure. Do I feed it? Pretty much every day. But what it does to me is that it never allows me to rest, to be at peace. So then I become dissatisfied with almost everything. And I fool myself, and maybe you're like me, that once I get that fill in the blank, that car, or that relationship, or that new toy, then finally I will have arrived, deep breath, we're out, until I get that thing that I've been going after, and a few days or weeks pass, and then it's not good enough anymore, and I got to get something else, because it never quite was enough. This is what Paul is speaking into. This is the challenge to you and I this morning. That as the church, we cannot live in the way that our society and culture lives, always grabbing for more, totally dissatisfied, unthankful for all the things that have been provided for us. So then the last big question that Paul asks us here, and now we'll jump into the Q&R, is this: that will you practice a radical gratitude? Will you be thankful? Will you not allow yourself any longer, and I'm talking to me here, to be captive by dissatisfaction? Because when we are thankful, you know what that actually is? It's actually a form of worship. Because it's part of this submission that says, Jesus, I recognize that as I see the world from your point of view, everything I need has already been gifted to me. Thank you. And then our thank you becomes worship. So hang on to that. Hopefully you've thrown some good questions my way. Maybe you're going to put me on the spot now, because no one's really done that in the last 3 weeks, so I'd like a little bit of a challenge in these next few minutes. Hopefully I don't eat my words. So with all that in mind, Tim, let's see, what's the worst you got here? How do we love and break down walls with those who believe that they themselves are erasing divisive lines? Example, lots of people my age champion pro-choice and LGBTQ rights. Right to the jugular. Okay, here we go. That is a tough one, right? Here's the thing. I don't think, as Christians, that Jesus or the scriptures call us to agree on absolutely everything. When Jesus calls, or the scriptures call for unity, I think that's a unity within disagreement. Here's the thing. In Philippians, we've talked about this before, when Paul talks about having the mind of Christ, it's not saying that I hold the same position as you do on absolutely everything. What he's calling for is, do we hold the same disposition? This is a disposition of love. So I might disagree with you. You might tick me off. You might be working against me. But my position towards you is always one of love. Because here's the thing. I don't know everything. I'm not right. How I feel about some of these issues today are different than they were yesterday, and they might be different tomorrow. Where I want to find myself is in a right place with Jesus, a right place with others. And I cannot do that if this is how I approach people. But when we approach with this posture, this disposition of love, recognizing that unity calls us to be together even if we're in disagreement, well, then that changes the picture. So what do you do with those kinds of people? You love them. You hang on to it. You live in that holy paradox. Yeah? I thought that was pretty good. Next. How can we help 10-year-olds in northern Saskatchewan live a full life? What is our part in this? That's massive. What is our part in this? I think right off the top of my head, for us here at Lakeview, as we have begin to develop our serving local and serving global initiatives, we're starting to lean in to some of those big pieces that are within our reach. So maybe you guys were aware of it, but last spring we had a great lunch and hangout time with those who are looking after foster kids. Many of them who are connected to some of these northern families. So do I live out there? No. Can I fly out there? No. But where is it? Right on my doorstep. And we've talked a bit about this previously in the series. So my two things, I think, would be this for you. If you might be one of those people who needs to be directly connected to the challenge, to the issue, ask Jesus about it. What part do you play in that? Or maybe ask him a second question. Jesus, what can I do right from here? What am I called to do? Because the issue just isn't far away, hundreds of kilometers away. This is something obviously in our province that has leaked into so much of who we are and to what we do. So how do we challenge it, combat it, face into it when it's right before us? So ask Jesus, where are the specifics? Am I supposed to be there? Or is it something I need to do right here? I think we got time for one last one. How do we call out the sin that's under the floorboards of our brothers and sisters' house, not just our own? Oh, I love your type. If you are not in friendship, if you are not in relationship, and remember that perfection quote that I put up earlier here? Your Christianity is not something that you accomplish on your own. You need to be in a deeply committed, loving relationship, I think, before you can start calling people out on that. Because if not, then we just have something called the internet, where everyone's angry, spouting off a whole bunch of other things, right? So I know in my life, I maybe have room for 3 or 4, maybe 5 people that I'm closely tied to. Those people, if I see something, I would say something. But if it's outside of that, you're not the moral police. No one's asked you to do anything. Don't be the hero. You know what you could do is maybe show some love, maybe show some grace, and perhaps pray for that person. Pray that God would bring them a tight circle of friends that would be able to speak into their life. At least that's how I see it in the scriptures. Cool? Why don't you stand with me this morning as we remember that you and I live in this world that is a now and not yet kind of world. That Jesus, yes, has overcome the powers, but they haven't come to full bloom yet. Why? Because he's giving us a chance. There's a means of grace. There is a submission that I still have to let go. So to you and I, let's look up and see the world from Christ's point of view. May it influence our perspective and make us aware of the times and the moments where we create ritualistically these divisive lines. And know that if we follow that train of thought, we turn people into meat, into commodities, to be used, to be pushed away, and not loved. And for those moments where we feel high and mighty on our tall horse, may God remind us of what has been hidden under our floorboards. But not to guilt us or make us feel terrible, but to remind us of his awesome forgiveness that he grants us and now calls us to share. And as we continue to forgive, as we continue to remain thankful for all that has been provided and gifted to us, friends, remember that is a form of worship. So as we close together here this morning, I thought it'd be neat to pray a prayer together. So I've actually taken the Lord's Prayer, paraphrased it, mashed it up with some other versions. I think it really suits what we've talked about this morning, and I'd love for us to pray it out loud together. So pray with me. Our Heavenly Father, reveal who you are. Set the world right in Saskatoon as it is in heaven. Keep us alive with what we need. Keep forgiving us as we keep forgiving others. Keep us safe from ourselves and the accuser. You're in charge. You can do anything. You alone deserve our greatest thanks forever and ever. Amen. Well, love God, love others, tell his story. If you need prayer, meet someone here. If not, say hi to someone new. We'll catch you next week.